Chapter 6 of The Rat Race by J. Franklin. Thanks, Jimmy, I replied. I'm going to try to stay this way. My wife sat down beside me and studied me closely. You look different, she remarked, to me at any rate. You're sort of coming to a focus. If only... You're so different and strange. Here was my chance to recover lost ground. As near as I can make out, I said, I've had a kind of amnesia. I know you, of course, and my name, and that this is my house, and that Ponto is my dog, even though he tried to bite me. I know the Pond Club and the Harvard Club, but that's about all I seem able to remember. I can't recall where I work, or where I bank, or who my friends are, or what kind of car I drive, or what I was doing before yesterday afternoon. She relaxed at the wholly scientific word amnesia, as though to name a mystery explained it. But you were saying something about being on an aircraft carrier in the Pacific, she objected. I laughed. That must have been part of a very vivid dream I was having in a chair in the bar at the pond when Randy Tolan woke me up. It was one of those dreams which seemed so real that real life seemed like a dream. It still does, a bit. That's where my alleged mind got stalled, and I'm still floundering around. Help me, won't you? You didn't seem to need much help remembering Virginia Rutherford, she remarked, but I'll try to fill in some of the gaps for you. You have your own firm, Tompkins, Wasson & Cohn, at No. 1 Wall Street. It's sort of combination brokerage office and investment counsel. You once told me that your specialty was finding nice rich old ladies and helping them reinvest their unearned millions. You bank at the National City Farmers, and your car is a black 41 Packard coupe. That helps a lot, I thanked her. Now, how about my friends? If I go to town tomorrow, I ought to be on the lookout for them. Business isn't so good right now that I can afford to let myself be run in as an amnesiac while my partners look after the loot. She frowned. I don't know much about your friends in town, since so many of them are in the war, she admitted. There's Merry Vale, of course, who roomed with you at Harvard, but he hasn't come out here much since Adela divorced him after that business in Bermuda. Sometimes you talk about the men you see at the club, but I've never been able to keep track of the Phils and Bills and Neds and Joes and Dicks and Harrys. You'll have to find your own way there. At the office, of course, there's Graham Wasson and Phil Cohn, your partners. But you won't have much trouble once you're at your desk. Wasson is dark and plump, and Cohn is fair and plump, and they're both about 5 years younger than you are. The office doesn't worry me, I agreed. I can handle anything that develops there. You know, Winnie, Jimmy remarked, if I were you, I wouldn't try to go to town for a few days. The office will run itself, and you need a rest. I don't know much about amnesia, but I've always heard that rest and kind treatment... I dissented emphatically. Worst thing in the world for it. I've always heard that the thing to do is go back over the ground until you come to the thing that gave you the original shock. And then it all comes back to you. If I stick around Bedford Hills, I'll just get panicky over not being sure whether I remember things or not. I'll go to town in the morning and see if I can't find myself. She laughed, as wives laugh. You may be a changed man, she announced, but you're still stubborn as a mule. Tell me, to change the subject, you say that you remember me. Tell me what I seem like to you now that you've changed, as you say. Aside from age, sex, scars, and distinguishing marks, if any, and marital status. I closed my eyes and thought of Dorothy as she had been that last night in Hartford before she walked out and I decided to join the Navy as a reserve officer. You are piano music on a summer night, something Scarlatti or Mozart, thin, cool, precise, gay. You are apple blossoms against a Berkshire hillside. You are the smoke of fallen leaves climbing into the cool October sky. You are surf on a sandy beach, with the gulls wheeling and the white caps racing past the lighthouse on the point. You are bobsleds and hot coffee and donuts by a roaring wood fire. And you're a lost child, with 2 pennies in your fist looking in the window of a 5-cent candy shop. Germaine relaxed. Except for that last bit, Winnie, you made me sound like a year-round vacation resort or an ad for a new automobile. You've mentioned almost everything about me except the one thing I obviously am, which is a simple, rather stupid woman, I guess, Germaine sighed, who's had everything in life except what she wants. All women are simple, I pontificated, since what they want is simple. You moron, she blazed. Don't you see that no woman knows what she wants until she is made to want it? You never made me want anything simple except to crack you over the head with something. After she had left, I sat for a long time. There seemed to be nothing to do or say. Winnie's domestic life was still in too much of a snarl for me to do the obvious thing and follow Germaine upstairs and into her bedroom, lock the door, and kiss her tear-stained face and tell her that I was sorry I had hurt her. Before it would be safe to accept her gambits, I must first explore my business connections. Hadn't my wife said something about girls in the office? My first stop in the morning, after I had been careful to take a late commuting train into the city in order to avoid businessmen who were sure to know and greet Winnie Tompkins, was the Bond Club. Tammy was behind the bar, and as soon as I entered, he turned and mixed me a powerful pick-me-up. I drained it with the usual convulsive effort and then pretended to relax. Thanks, Tammy, I said. That's what I needed. Good morning, Mr. Tompkins, he remarked. I'm glad to see you back. You were looking a trifle seedy, if you don't mind my saying so, sir, when you were in here Monday afternoon. I took a day off in the country and got rested up, I told him. I feel fine now. Anybody in the club? Not just now, sir. A couple of gentlemen were asking for you yesterday afternoon. That would be Tuesday. That was Commander Tolan, sir, and a friend of his, a Mr. Harcourt his name was, who hasn't been here before. They asked me if you were at your home, but I just laughed. Him gone home? I said. Not while he has a girl in a flat on Park Avenue. Begging your pardon, Mr. Tompkins, I knew you didn't want to be bothered wherever you were, and so I said the first thing that came to my head. You're doing fine, Tammy, I assured him. I don't want to see anybody for a couple of days. Now then, I'd like you to tell me what happened here Monday afternoon. It's the first time in my life I've ever drawn a complete blank. Well, sir, the club steward recited, you came in about 2 o'clock and sat down in your usual chair, that one in the corner. You said something about having had lunch at the Harvard Club, sir, and had a couple of scotch and sodas here. Was I tight, Tammy? Not to call tight. You didn't show it, and after a time you went to sleep, like you was tired out. You was still sleeping when Mr. Morgan, Mr. Davis, and Commander Tolan came in. That would be a little after 3 o'clock, sir. They made some talk about how you were sleeping through the noise they made, that it would take a bomb to wake you. Then, sir, I guess you had some kind of a dream. You began talking like, and thrashing with your arms and making noises. So Commander Tolan, he said, Jesus, we can't drink with that going on, and went and shook you by the shoulder until you woke up. You'd been dreaming all right, Mr. Tompkins, because you talked wild when you woke up, about Alaska and where were you. The others joked a bit about it after you left, but I'd take my oath, sir, that you weren't really what might be called tight, Mr. Tompkins. Thanks a million, Tammy, I said. That's a load off my mind. I drew a blank and didn't know where I'd been or what I'd been doing. Can you let me have some money? I'm a bit short of cash. Of course, sir. How much will you need? A couple of $100 will do, I told him, if you have that much. That will be easy, sir. If you'll just sign a check like the house rule says, I'll get it from the safe. He nearly caught me. Signing checks was something I simply could not do until I had learned to imitate Winnie Tompkins' signature. I had tried in the guest room at Bedford Hills the previous evening and found that my original signature as Frank E. Jacklin was completely unchanged by my transmigration, and that my own copy desk scrawl was the only handwriting I could commit. I had burned the notepaper on which I had made the crucial experiments and flushed the ashes down the toilet. One of my objects in coming to the pond had been to see if I couldn't get money by simply initialing a chit. I hastily looked in my billfold. There was still a fair amount of money left. It would last me until I found a way to draw on Winnie's bank account. Never mind after all, I told Tammy. I guess I have enough to last me until I get down to the office. If anybody asks for me, you haven't seen me since Monday and don't know where I am. Very good, sir, he agreed. I'll take any messages that come for you, sir, and not let on I've set eyes on you. My next stop was an old hangout of mine and Dorothy's from my early newspaper days. A place on East 53rd Street where you can get a good meal if you have the money to pay for it and the time to wait for it, and I had both. I knew that none of Winnie's friends would be seen dead in the place, and I didn't want to try lunch at the Harvard Club where I'd have to sign the dining room order or the bar check. The place was reasonably uncrowded, it was not quite noon, and I had a pleasant lunch. It was a little after 1 o'clock when I reached the Harvard Club. The doorman glanced at my face and automatically stuck a little ivory peg in the hole opposite the name of Tompkins on the list of members. I checked my hat and coat and strolled through the sitting rooms into the large lounge library beside the dining room. A couple of men nodded and smiled as I passed them, so I nodded back and said hi in a conversational tone. In the lounge I found a chair and a copy of the World Telegram, so I decided to catch up with the war news. The German armies were beginning to crumble, but there was still talk of a stand along the Elbe, and Hitler was reported fortifying the mountain districts of southern Germany into a redoubt for a last Valhalla battle. The Pacific news was good. The fighting on Okinawa was going our way, and the cleanup in the Philippines was well in hand. The Navy Department discounted enemy reports of heavy damage to American warships by Jap suicide pilots, but as an old Navy PRO, I could tell that it had been plenty. I'd heard about the kamikazes from some of our pilots who had seen them off late, and I had no doubt that they were doing a job on the 7th Fleet. Roosevelt had gone south for a couple of weeks' rest at Warm Springs, Georgia, and Ed Stettnes was in the final throes of organizing the United Nations conference at San Francisco.
Hi, Winnie. Don't you speak to your old friends anymore?
I looked up to see a lean, wolfish-looking man with a gray mustache, a slightly bald head, and definitely Bond Street clothes. Oh, hello, I said, and returned to reading the paper. The newspaper was firmly taken out of my hands, and the man sat down beside me.
We've got to have a talk, he said.
Why? What's happened?
There's been a lot of talk about you running around town in the last 24 hours, Winnie. None of the other alleged friends we know had the guts to tell you, but I thought your roommate...
So, you're Mary Vail, I said stupidly.
You're in worse shape than I thought you were, Winnie, he replied.
Yes, I'm Meriwether Vail, who started his lifelong career of rescuing Winfred Tompkins from blondes and booze at Harvard in 1916. Now, if you'll just crawl out of your alcoholic coma and listen to me for 5 minutes before you take off your next skirt, you'll learn something to your advantage. How about a drink, Mary?
Not before 5, so help me. And you'd better lay off liquor till you hear this. Here it is.
There's a story going the rounds that the FBI is after you. At any rate, at least one obvious G-man has been reported in full cry on your footprints. I sat up, startled. This was too much, even for purgatory. What had Winnie been up to? What am I supposed to have done, Mary? I asked. Trifled with the Mann Act? Told fibs on my income tax return? Failed to notify the local draft board that I was taking the train to New York? Bought black market nylons for my mistress, or what?
Vail looked mysterious.
For all I know, I may be letting myself in for Alcatraz, old man, but the dope is that you've been violating the Espionage Act, communicating with the enemy or stealing official secrets. I leaned back in my chair and shook with laughter. Of all the pure, unadulterated BS I've ever heard, I give you my word of honor as Porcellian that there's not a syllable of truth in it.
Vale looked increasingly distressed. "If you're really innocent, you'd better be careful. 10 to 1 you haven't an alibi, and you'll need a lawyer. Slip me a bill now and retain me as your counsel. No, this isn't a gag. Something's cooking, even if it's only mistaken identity. And I've seen enough of the law in wartime to know that you'll be better off with the old cry, 'I demand to see my attorney,' when they march you down to the FBI headquarters to answer a few questions." "Thanks, Mary," I said, "and here's $20 to go on with. If the police are looking for me, I'd better go down to my office and see that things are apple pie before they lock up the brains of our outfit. Besides," I added, "you've just given me an idea of how I can make a hell of a lot of money." End of chapter 6.